let's start working on Vlan Trunks. This is actually very simple to configure, so this should go pretty quickly. I left up our topology from last time. So we're going to add an additional switch and some hosts and take a look at how that trunking works. So let's add another switch. And what we'll do is, before we connect it, we'll add some hosts on his side. And we'll connect those in there. Alright, good. So now before we interconnect these two switches, we'll do some configuration. On our new switch, we are going to want to add that VLAN in there. So switch 0 on the right side there, he has VLAN 2. So, but if we take a look here, we only have VLAN 1 and the 1000 range that are there by default. So we have to add VLAN 2. So this is where that VTP comes in handy, because it could have added it for us if that were in the topology at the time. So what we have to do is just add that VLAN. So we're going to do VLAN 2 just like before. I'm going to name, the name doesn't necessarily have to match, it's the number. So, but we'll name it IT, and we'll exit out. So now if we do show VLAN brief, why not? There we go. We have VLAN 2. We have IT. And let's choose a link we're going to connect across. So show IP int brief. It needs to start with do. And what do we have? We have up to 0/24. So let's use the very last interface to connect these two switches. So let's go into that interface. And I'm going to show you how to change it, force it into a trunk mode. So by default, they're set to a dynamic mode, and we've already seen forcing it into an access mode for those hosts. We're now going to force it into a trunk mode. So we're going to do switch port mode trunk. That's it. We can do switch port. One other thing we're going to want to do though is switch port trunk, and we're going to do native. I like tab complete, that's why you're seeing all this. I'm just a fan of using tab complete. Switch port trunk native, and then we're going to choose a VLAN. So remember I was talking about how the native VLAN has to match on each side, so we're going to use VLAN 100. It's going to be my native VLAN. And that's basically it. So let's go over to switch 0, and we're going to set that port as a trunk as well. There we go. And over here, let me just go into, we'll do an interface range FA01 to 2, and we're going to make these switch port mode access. These are for the two hosts over here. I'm just configuring those because I'm being picky right now. So now those are access ports just because. So if we do show run, if we go down here, you'll see there's our configuration for port 24 on switch 1, and then if we do show run, there's our configuration on switch 0, so everything matches. So let's connect that with a crossover. We'll choose that specifically. And we have to wait for spanning tree to do its thing, so we're going to see this orange here for a couple more seconds. There we go. So now what we can do is show interfaces trunk, and that's going to show me what trunks I have. So what this is showing me here is I have port 24 is enabled for a trunk, and by default it's using encapsulation of .1q. It's in trunking mode. Native VLAN is 100. It also says what VLANs are allowed on the trunk. We're going to go into this in the next video. We're going to talk about security for VLAN trunks. You can limit what VLANs are allowed from one side to the other. And then it also automatically tells you what VLANs are active in the management domain in other states. So what we really care about though is it's on, those are the allowed VLANs, everything's up and running. So let's go in here and we will give these guys some IP addresses. It's 2.3 and this could be 2.4. You don't have to save it, it just does it by itself. And let's go to PC0 on the right side and we're going to ping which was PC3. See if that works. So it didn't work. So let's take a look as to why. That looks okay. That looks okay. Let's go into this one on the left side. Let's try to ping his buddy up top there. So, okay, so we can ping from here to here. We can ping from here to here. We can't ping across our trunk. So we're going to have to figure out why that is. Here's a good example of viewing the MAC table on a switch and seeing the MACs that are available across from another switch. So see how it says one interface and there's a whole bunch of MACs that are available on it? So that's normal to see when you have a trunk link, for example. It knows about all the MACs that are on the left side, but it's only available through this one interface, so that's normal. Let's take a look at switch 1. Oh yeah, I didn't assign it the right VLAN. Okay, there we go, a little more troubleshooting. So we need to go into switch 1 and actually assign it the right VLAN, so that would help. So let's go into interface range FAO 1 to 2. So I had assigned it the access, the mode access, but I didn't even assign it the right VLAN. So let's go in and do switch port access VLAN 2. There we go, see if that works. And we'll do show VLAN brief. Okay, 1 and 2 are now what they're supposed to be. So let's wait for spanning tree to do its thing. This is okay, I don't mind making mistakes. It means I'm human. And these are things you're going to see constantly as you're learning as well, so no problem. Still waiting for spanning tree. There we go. Alright, so we're on PC0 up at the top here. We're going to ping PC3. Let's try this again. Aha! There we go. And also a neat thing with packet tracer, see how it's blinking? Every time it blinks, that means that's some sort of protocol data unit, a PDU is being sent or received. So when we go and ping it from 0 to 3, see how it's more active along this link? You can actually see the activity. It's pretty cool. I kind of like that. So that works. So I should be able to ping, I think it was number 4 is this one over here, So there you see that link is blinking. So that's working. So there we go. So I was missing my VLAN association. So that was a good example of an oops. So that's up and running now. So our trunk is working. We also have the option of going into a switch and using that dynamic mode. So remember that one time it mentioned the port was in dynamic mode, we couldn't use port security. So dynamic mode automatically brings up trunks if it can. So let's change our trunk to dynamic mode and let it automatically negotiate. So dynamic mode is supposed to help you by automatically detecting that, hey, I can make a trunk, and it will bring up a trunk. The problem is it's not very secure, because then if somebody was malicious and they wanted to, if you had all your ports set to dynamic mode, you could connect some sort of device here that would pretend to be in dynamic mode as well, and then you could end up becoming a switch essentially, and you could hack that way. So it's recommended essentially to not use dynamic mode, but it is an available thing with Cisco devices. So we'll show you how that works. So what we're going to do, there's two modes. There's dynamic auto and dynamic desirable. So dynamic auto is like the passive mode, and dynamic desirable is the active mode. So if a port is in dynamic auto mode, it means it will become a trunk if the other port on the other side is set to trunk or desirable. If it's set to desirable, it will actively try to bring up a trunk if the other side is on desirable, auto, or trunk mode. So auto is your passive mode, desirable is your active mode. Usually people will just set desirable on both sides if they do use dynamic mode. That way it's always trying to bring up that trunk between those two ports. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go into our trunk ports on both sides. And we're going to set dynamic desirable. So we're going to do switch port mode dynamic desirable. So this is, I purposely did not set this side yet. So over here on switch 0, which is actually this switch, we have switch 1, which is this switch. Switch 0 is still set to trunk mode. So if we go look at the bottom here, he's still set to trunk mode. So he's forcing himself into trunk mode. This side I've set to desirable. So this side is actively trying to negotiate some sort of trunk. So what we have here is a situation where one is desirable, one is trunk, and the trunk works. If we look at our trunk do show interface trunk, it says mode is desirable, we're in trunking mode, VLANs are allowed, everything works. And we can test that. So I'm pinging from PC 0 over here, over to this guy, the trunking is still working. What if I set this side to desirable? So I'm in my interface. Let's do switch port mode dynamic desirable. We have to wait through that little spanning tree. And I keep mentioning spanning tree. There are alternative protocols to spanning tree out there, just so you know. Although spanning tree is the one that they mention in CCNA and a lot of Cisco documents. There are other vendors and other protocols and technologies out there. Alright, so that's up now. So let's go take a look. Do show int trunk. So now we're in desirable trunking. Desirable trunking. So now if both sides are undesirable, everything still works. Let's close out this one. Let's do one side as auto. Let's going to renegotiate again, of course. Do its little spanning tree dance. Almost there. Almost. There we go. Alright, so now it's up. Let's go check our trunk. So now we have one side on auto, one side on desirable. The status is trunking. Everything's up and running. So that all works. So finally, let's set this side to auto. And we'll let this come up. So let spanning tree do its thing. Alright, looks like that's done. Let's check. Alright, good. There. Now it's done. Let's check our switches. We're going to check our trunk info. Yep. See, look, the trunk isn't working because both sides is set to auto. So auto is that passive mode, remember? So it will become a trunk if it wants to, if someone else asks it to, but it's not going to actively try to become a trunk. So it just listens for trunk dynamic information. So if we go show interface, let me get out of this. There we go. Show interface FAO24. It's interesting in that it'll show that it's up on both sides, but our trunk is not actually up. So that's something you'll have to be aware of. And frankly, the easiest way to really determine that, and I'll do show interfaces FAO24 here too, and you'll see that it's up on this side. Probably the easiest way of determining that is just do a show run and just check it what the config is set for. So see how it's set? I set it to dynamic auto, and by doing that, that's actually like the default situation on the interfaces here with Cisco devices. So when I set it to dynamic auto, it automatically just took the line out of the config because that's what it is automatically anyway by default. So if I go in though and I change this to dynamic desirable again or make it a trunk again, then that'll come back up. So, and obviously if we test, that's not going to work. So that's one thing where you could fool yourself by accidentally not turning the trunk on. If you just leave the settings as is, it'll be in auto mode and it won't come up as a trunk, even if you set the native VLAN. So one other one we'll do is show sometimes you can do show Dtp interface. This one is just show DTP. This gives you an idea that DTP is running. You can actually turn off DTP so it doesn't do this sort of dynamic work, but if you do show DTP, it'll tell you what it's actually doing and gives you a better idea. So let's end it here, and we will move on to Vlan Security a little bit, and how you can kind of lock down your VLANs.